All right, it is Wednesday, 4 p.m. Eastern, 1 p.m. Pacific. That means you're in the nut zone. Yes, you are. We're here to talk NFL football from Sports Nut. I am Skackle Branson, and joining me, as always, my partner in all of this is my good friend Ryan Dyrud. He's the founder of the Los Angeles Football Network, part of the Sports Nut family here. And Ryan, I don't know about you, man. Are you going through any football withdrawals? I think the people out there are.
Yeah. When does the UFL start? Isn't it supposed to start here soon? I know the one league last year started the week after the Super Bowl when the XFL first launched, and then they've changed the dates with the merger now. But yeah, always good to be with you. Luckily, even though there's no games to be played, there is football coverage year round. I feel like literally late June to early July is like the only actually off period. So we got a lot to get into, my friend, but good as always to see that beautiful head of hair across the screen from you.
It's going back a little bit, but hey, what are you gonna do? I'm talking to a guy who's got that's okay.
Yeah,
it looks good on you though. See, I was talking about a guy. So I have a friend, and we were having a cigar at a cigar lounge, and he had just shaved his head because he was losing his hair, and he's like, "Man, I finally went." And he had like you a good head for being bald. There's
nice.
like me, no. My head's too big. Like it would be way too big. I would look like something out of a Star Trek reject movie. So I'm glad at least I'm keeping it, even if it's moving back. I'll deal with it.
It looks great,
but I appreciate that. No hat for you today, though. I was going to wear a hat.
Today.
It's like I
wanted the glow. Oh, for me, no hat. Yeah, hat today. I know I always look forward to your hats, but
no, I look forward to your hats too. So I mean, look, we're all about hats, but we are also here about football. We're talking about NFL football, and we're going to get into a specific story today. You might have seen from the image promoting the show, and that is Russell Wilson. Where will Russ ride next? Is heating up a little bit because we're coming up on the NFL Combine next week. Of course, we've talked to you about that here before, but also we start to see teams do two things. This week, Ryan, of course, teams can franchise tag players. We have not seen that happen yet. We also have free agency starting with the legal tampering, most ridiculous term in the history of mankind, legal tampering period from March 11th through the 13th. Then the new league year starts, and it's a free-for-all. And you can sign people, trade people, all that stuff. Although we'll start to hear about trades and other moves coming up here pretty soon. But Russell Wilson's at the center of that because the Broncos are definitely moving on, as they should. They're not convinced. They're not all in him. We saw what they did at the end of the season. And there's another quarterback they're thinking about. We'll talk about that in a minute. But that's where we're going to start. We're going to get into some more NFL news and rumors. So stick around. If you're not a Broncos fan, that's fine. It's still relevant, though. Could Russell Wilson be coming to your team? We'll talk about that as well as the other rumors around there. But you grew up a Broncos fan, Ryan.
I did.
And so you know this team well. And it's clear, based on what happened last year, we know Russell Wilson's going to go. We know they're going to have to pay him an obscene amount of money, but there's no option for the Broncos at this point. The way they've handled it, just like the Raiders did with Derek Carr the year before, it was the same situation. They've clearly said, we're moving on from you. And Russell Wilson's already selling his house. He's showing people he's trying to get out of Denver, apparently. And so this is going to happen. But my question for you, when you look at this, is the Broncos, yes, they're going to eat the money. Okay. We all know that. It's just the way it goes.
Yeah.
But then they have the question to ask, who's going to fill those shoes? But when you look at the Russell Wilson situation in Denver, why didn't this work in your mind?
Oh man, great question. It's unfortunate. I had so much promise that it was going to work after, Broncos seemingly searching for years after Peyton Manning for their next quarterback, and Russ obviously had great success with Seattle. And I think two factors, Scott, and I'd love to hear your opinion too, because I know you cover the Raiders, but hey, you play the Broncos twice a year, and you guys have had the upper hand the last handful
5
of years over the Broncos. So, but in year one, it seemed like because of the coaching hire that they made with Nathaniel Hackett, it just seemed like Russ was just given way too much power and was able to do whatever he wanted. The whole office thing, I don't think is a big deal. A lot of quarterbacks have their own office. Tom Brady has his own office. So, the old private quarterback trainer, lots of quarterbacks have that. So I don't think that was an issue that got made by the media, but he did just have a lot of power. He was given an obscene amount of money before playing a down in Denver, which is the reason why he came. He had a no trade clause, and he was only going to waive it if he got a new contract to whatever team he went. So that was unfortunately a necessity. And then it was just the whole, from the top down, that first year was just an absolute dumpster fire with Nathaniel Hackett, with the offensive coordinator, switching the offensive coordinator half year. The play calling was abysmal. Just the way things were run. Nathaniel Hackett was, beloved by players, but was not a true kind of leader in getting that organization in the right way. So that was the start. Then you flip it, you go get Sean Payton, and it's basically like a complete reversal. You go to like almost a dictatorship style way
Yes.
of running things, which needed to happen. I mean, they needed to get back on track, and I think even a year or two down the line now, Peyton will probably even lean back a little bit in terms of how much he had to have control of. But I think Russ, we saw improvement. I mean, he definitely, you wrote an article about it on Sports Not back in October, I believe.
Mhm.
Absolutely improved, but it just wasn't quite to the level that Sean Payton would have liked, and obviously Broncos fans would have liked to see. And I think I'm getting long-winded here, but the biggest thing when you look at a Sean Payton offense and a Russell Wilson type player is I think Russ is really good off script and kind of
Right.
doing something. He needs a good running game. And then when he can go off script and be the magic man that he was in Seattle, that's what makes him great. So you need an offensive play caller that, gives him some direction, but then just says, hey, go be Russ. Sean Payton has such a specifically designed offensive system that, requires, I'm not saying he's not smart enough to do it, but it just requires a skill set as a quarterback to run that system within the rate of play. And I just don't think
Yeah.
Russ was great at that.
Yeah.
He tried that. And it just wasn't great at it. Like when he had his success at the end of games is when he actually was scrambling out of the pocket and maybe just running for first downs and whatnot. So long-winded answer, but that's what I think. I mean, do you have anything other than that to add why
No,
it didn't work?
no, I think it gets back to one thing that I've been talking a lot about with a much younger quarterback who hasn't achieved obviously what Russell Wilson has, which is Justin Fields. A lot of people want to write Justin Fields, oh, he's terrible. And you have this expert that says he's terrible. Then you have another expert says no. And that situation, like you're in the right situation, not just the right system, but the right coach. We saw the interactions with Russell Wilson and Sean Payton, the screaming matches and all that stuff. It clearly wasn't a marriage that was meant to last. For whatever reason, I don't know that Sean Payton ever gave Russell Wilson the chance. I don't know it well enough to know, but I do know that clearly it wasn't working. And so Denver, in this day and age, you can't just stick with the guy because you're paying him. I
Yeah.
understand that the limitations it puts on them and how they're going to have to pay the piper. But this is the NFL. You cannot say, well, then we just got to sit back for 4 years and accept this guy as our quarterback when we don't feel like he can lead us to where we need to be, no matter how much it costs you. And I think you have to get used to this because I think there's going to be more, maybe not quite the size of the Russell Wilson, because that was a very different situation. And obviously Denver gave up a lot of draft capital. But to me, you're going to see this more because guess what? It's a quarterback driven league. And if your quarterback isn't the person you want them to be, whether or not they're washed up, they're good or not, and they're just in the wrong situation, you have to move on. You cannot just stick there and say, well, we got 3 more years left on the contract.
Yeah. Yeah, and it pains me to say as a Bronco fan, but this probably will go down as one of the worst trades in NFL history when you look at what the Broncos gave up, the
Yeah.
output they got from him, and the amount of money they paid to retain him or to not retain him now moving forward. But I to your point, Scott, I think it's takes a certain level of ownership
Mm.
and general manager and coach to be able to admit like this was a big mistake. Now the coach wasn't there when it was happening. Ownership wasn't there yet either, but the GM was there, George Payton. But be able to say this was a mistake. Let's cut our losses, move on, and which we'll get to the conversation. But now it's like, how do they move on without just
Yes.
sacrificing the next 2 to 3 years? But before we get to that, just keeping on Russ, since they opened the show as where will he go next? What do you think? What do you think his next landing
Man.
spot makes the most sense?
So it's interesting because it really depends a little bit on him. Does he want to go to a place where he thinks they're closer to being a winning team, i.e., you could look at Atlanta, right? I think Atlanta's a fair spot, right?
Mhm.
If Atlanta wanted to go that direction, if they feel they're close enough with the changes they made to kind of make the jump. And last year, look, they could have made the playoffs if they had a little more consistent play at quarterback. And so if you have that, okay, great. Or is he just willing to look for a place to finish out his career and make one more contract? And by the way, these people who say that Russell Wilson's going to sign for the minimum somewhere, he's not signing for the minimum anywhere. He's going to
No.
get fair market value. So I look at Atlanta. I look at actually, believe it or not, because I just don't think they can get a young quarterback, or they should get a young quarterback, and they have a long way to go. But New England. New England's another spot I could see him ending up as well. And then there's a slew of other places because so many teams need quarterbacks. Washington, who doesn't get the young quarterback they want? And are they going to want to try to make a jump and get a veteran in there. I don't think he makes sense in Las Vegas for the same reason, even though the Raiders are close, I think, to being, a playoff team in some ways. But other places that he could end up, I mean, look, you'd want that guy if you're close. And I'm not seeing the situation that's real clear cut to me where that fits. What about you?
Yeah, I don't know if there's a slam dunk one. To me, the
Yeah,
one that makes the most sense, though, and I think feasibly has a shot of happening, is the Pittsburgh Steelers.
the Steelers.
I think when you
Yes,
just
thank
look
you.
at the way their organization is run,
Yeah.
the longevity and security they have with Mike Tomlin. I know there's been rumors, but unless they just go on a downfall, he's not going anywhere unless he wants to leave. The way the Rooney family operates, they put their trust in him, and they were. They've been a perennial playoff team every year, like it or love it. We've talked about them, like how are they actually this record? But I think Russ is absolutely an upgrade over what they have at
Oh,
quarterback over there right now.
yeah.
And I know Kenny Pickett maybe will be the future, and it definitely is not a. It's here's what I'll say: when you draft a quarterback, you start him early, and then you bring in a vet to replace him. Most likely, that means his days are done in that
Yes.
organization, similar to like a Zach Wilson with New York.
Mhm.
They could maybe salvage it. Russ is 36 if he goes there, plays two seasons, and then Kenny Pickett's able to groom. But I do think it's fair to say the Steelers, with a competent quarterback, are a playoff team. Are they a Super Bowl team? I don't know, but they're a playoff team, and I think Russ gives them that. So, to me, I think that's the one that makes the most sense.
Yeah.
And
It's
for
a
the
great
Steelers, I think they need to go after it for sure.
it's a great recommendation because I do think too with the Steelers, you talk about Tomlin. Tomlin is a guy, and you think about the personalities that have been in Pittsburgh over the years. He's a guy who lets those guys be who they are, number
Mhm.
one. And number two, I think because of his experience and his longevity, as you mentioned, and the makeup of that roster, he would be fine with Russell Wilson operating in the style he likes, which is kind of, hey, I'm going to create outside the pocket. I'm going to call my own plays at times, and as long as they're on the same page and it's working out, I think that's a good call. Actually, I think Pittsburgh would be a great spot for him as well. I can't believe I forgot it, so thank you for reminding me
Yeah.
as well.
And they just throw out, obviously they named Arthur Smith their new OC, and I
Yes.
think Russ could probably play in that system pretty well as well.
Absolutely. Great call out. Now, as you mentioned, and I'm going to show up on Sportsnot right now, we have the story from our own Vincent Frank about the Broncos and them coveting.
Mm,
They're coveting a young quarterback. And who is that young quarterback? Who's that guy in the video there, by the
look
way?
at that.
He's a good
With the
looking
hat.
dude. Is JJ McCarthy. Right. So it says here in Vincent's story, which, of course, again, you can read up on sportsnot.com. It says, quote, this is from a longtime Minnesota Vikings broadcaster, Paul Allen. And here's what he says is this is just a little bit of steam that is beginning to emerge locally that Sean Payton loves JJ McCarthy. Payton covets the next Drew Brees. Gee, I wonder why. So just keep that in mind. When you're thinking 11 and you're thinking JJ McCarthy at 11, just know behind you, desperate Payton, who basically will beg, borrow, or steal to get exactly what he wants from the draft in a QB. A pretty reliable individual informed me over the weekend that Payton is quite enamored with JJ McCarthy. Again, you can catch that up. Vincent Frank's story. Denver Broncos reportedly coveted first round quarterback prospect up on sportsnot.com. But you look at that, and I know the reason that story is blowing up so much on the site today is because Bronco fans want to know what's next, Ryan, right? They want to know who's coming in next. And you look at JJ McCarthy, that's the kind of quarterback. Again, I think he's underrated. People go by just numbers and they don't look at the skill set. They don't look at JJ McCarthy. Yes, against big time competition, he sometimes didn't throw very many passes, but that's what Jim Harbaugh asked him to do. So you look at Sean Payton and what you mentioned about Sean Payton, say, hey, I want you to work within my system and run exactly what I tell you to do. That would fit the bill. He wants a young quarterback because of that. He wants to mold that quarterback. What do you feel about JJ McCarthy and these rumors that he is somebody that Peyton's enamored with?
Yeah, I mean, super interesting, and obviously everything's coming out since the season ended that NFL scouts and executives are much higher on McCarthy than media and fans are, which, usually there's always a couple players like that the media sees as one way and actual teams drafting see another way. McCarthy's one of those guys. He's not a guy that I've loved his tape. I haven't watched a ton of it, but I've watched enough, basically because I watched every single Caleb Williams game. So I'm comparing to that, and I don't see that same level. But he absolutely, I think, could play very well in a Sean Payton system. And we talked a few shows ago, Scott, how everyone loves to look at quarterback prospects specifically and, just generational talent. Here's what they give. But every quarterback, it really depends on where you end up and what
It
system you
does.
end up in and what surroundings you end up in. I mean, Pat Mahomes might not be Pat Mahomes if he's not with Andy Reid and the Chiefs. Tom Brady certainly probably isn't Tom Brady if he's not with Bill Belichick in New England. And you can go down the list. And there's only a few guys that we've seen transcend that with either different coordinators over and over or actually going to different teams and changing things up. So McCarthy is a guy that I don't know if he goes to, not to throw shade, but goes to a Vegas with a Luke Getsy and is successful.
Mhm.
Goes to just Chicago with all the turmoil there and is successful. But I think he could go to Denver with Sean Payton and be successful. And when you look at the Broncos, what they do with Russ, they're not signing a free agent quarterback. They have no money. They're with
Mm-mm.
Russ, they're still going to be 25 million over the cap. So they're eating that. Plus they're going to have to shave off other just to get compliant. So they're going to be rolling with Jarrett Stidham and then whoever they can draft.
Yeah.
And whether it's a mid-round pick that they just, use as a backup and Stidham's the guy for the next year or two, or they're able to get a JJ McCarthy or a Michael Penix or someone of that pedigree, then I think that's their best bet. And like I said, I don't love McCarthy yet. I want to watch
Mhm.
a little bit more, but Jim Harbaugh loves him. I think it's a little irrational calling him the best quarterback he's ever seen at Michigan in college. But Jim Harbaugh just won a natty. He's seen a lot of quarterbacks, seen a lot of good plays. So I think that's a fairly good stamp of approval, at least. And if he's given the time to succeed in Denver, I think that's probably his best place to go. What do you think? Is that his best landing spot?
It might be because of the system and the coaching there, because what Peyton did. Of course, he had Drew Brees again. This is the Belichick Brady question, like quarterback coach. They both, right? They both are successful together. There's that incredible mixture of coach and player sometimes that just clicks. And so if I'm looking at that, I'm looking at a young quarterback. I'm looking in Vegas. Vegas doesn't have the coaching staff. And I'm not here to tell you Sean Payton's a saint. Obviously, he's not, based on what happened in the past, nor am I here to tell you he's the best coach that ever lived. But I will tell you that if I'm a young quarterback, who do I look at from a success standpoint? I look at Vegas and I look at Denver and I think, okay, well, I know what Sean Payton's done and I know what he did with his last quarterback, who Drew Brees, when he got to the Saints after his first stint with the Chargers, wasn't the Hall of Famer that he became. So clearly, them working together helped not only the Saints and, of course, win a Super Bowl, but they helped Drew Brees develop as a pro quarterback.
Mm-hmm.
And he's been very vocal about that too. So yeah, so I think Denver, that's why the AFC West, not just because you and I have a more of a personal interest in it, but it's fascinating because you already have two franchise quarterbacks that aren't going anywhere in Justin Herbert and Patrick Mahomes. And now if you're the Broncos and the Raiders, you can't wait 2 or 3 more years to address the quarterback. It's already too late in addressing the quarterback situation. You're already behind the 8 ball.
Yeah.
So if you're going to do it, you got to do it now. So that's why I think Denver will be very aggressive in whatever they can do to get that quarterback in the first round. And like you said, who that is, it depends who they like, right? It depends who they love and who they evaluate. And obviously Peyton's going to have a major, major influence on who that player is.
Yeah. And, for Raider Nation and Broncos country, it's certainly right now painful seeing man, Pat Mahomes, Justin Herbert, and as of right now, Aiden O'Connell and Jarrett Stidham. That is not an ideal scenario to be in for either team. The other interesting little nugget just to throw at you, Scott, is so Paul Allen, who had this quote, and everyone's probably like, why is Paul Allen, a Vikings guy, talking about the Broncos? And you said it in the quote, and you read it correctly, so I'm not saying you, but I think people probably listening maybe didn't catch it. Sitting at 11 is the Vikings.
Yes.
The Broncos are actually 12.
12.
So at 11, the Vikings, obviously, there's a lot of conversation about what's going to happen with Kirk Cousins. If they don't resign Kirk Cousins with head coach Kevin O'Connell, they're in the quarterback sweepstakes. How does JJ McCarthy fit in a Kevin O'Connell / Sean McVay style system? And I think he could potentially fit there. I think a Michael Penix fits better personally, but it's the age an issue, is the injury history an issue.
Yeah.
So it's going to get real interesting there, how the dominoes fall. And it starts with free agency, because if Kirk Cousins is back in Minnesota, well, then Denver might be able to get JJ at 12. They may not have to move up at all. But if they don't resign, I don't want to guarantee. I never like guaranteeing things, Scott. But if so Russ will be gone. We know that for sure.
Yeah.
If Kirk Cousins is gone, also say he goes to Atlanta or whatever, we're going to see an arms race of trading up, and I could see
Oh,
2 or
yes.
3 teams trading up from where they are into the top
Oh,
5.
yes. Oh, yes. And Ryan, there's some teams that people don't think about that could trade up. So, for example, by my count, and on a Raiders show, this was like a month ago, and I got blasted. I got blasted for suggesting that the New York Giants might trade up for a quarterback. Now, what have I seen in the last week and a half? Giants media talking about how they might be trading up to get a quarterback.
Yeah.
Oh, they just gave Daniel Jones the money. Are you not watching the Russell Wilson situation?
Yeah.
Like,
Okay.
you can't
Wanna win?
afford. You can afford to eat the money and figure it out. You can't afford to pay a quarterback you don't believe in that can't get you to the next spot. Okay. So I agree with you. I think there's 8 teams that genuinely need a quarterback now, and there's another 2 or 3 who might be looking to improve. So
Yeah.
you look at that top 10, to your point, where the Vikings fall just out of the Raiders, or out just 2 spots below them at 13, who
Yeah.
desperately need a quarterback. You suddenly, I mean, it could be a just crazy time. And the point to make here too, Ryan, is remember these teams, because they don't know what's going to happen. You want to trade up, doesn't mean somebody will, right? So you try your best, you give your offer, whatever. So these teams, remember, free agency opens first.
Yeah.
So outside of the Broncos, who obviously have their veteran in Jarrett Stidham, the rest of those teams have to have their plan B, which is they got to be active in the free agent quarterback market too, and sign
Yeah.
somebody in case they can't get the guy they want in the draft. So that's why you'll see a team. Let's say Washington just cannot sign at least a passable bridge kind of veteran guy, right?
Yeah.
And then they go into the draft and they can't move up. Guess what they're going to do? They're going to start offering a lot more to move up because they're desperate.
Yeah.
So I agree with you. I think it's going to be a crazy first round, especially after we see. And I think Cousins ends up back in Minneapolis, but I could be wrong. But we'll see once we know where those dominoes fall with those quarterbacks. Because the quarterback free agency class, you have really, to me, Cousins and Mayfield the top. Then you have Minshew's okay as well.
Yeah.
Not great, but if you're looking for a stopgap, fine. But you get past the 3rd or 4th rung of those free agent quarterbacks, and it's kind of
Yeah. And all indications is Baker will be back in Tampa, so that
right.
should be locked in. And I agree. If Minnesota's smart, Kirk will be back, and maybe they take a flyer in the 3rd round on a quarterback they can groom with O'Connell in the next couple of years. Let's if you're down, if you had another direction, let's change it. But let's play a little speculation game here at the top, kind of 13 picks to end the show.
Let's do it. Let's do it.
All right. So let's just say the top 3 picks go chalk. So no trades happen. Chicago ends up trading Fields, which we could talk about that too, where we think Fields ends up.
Yeah.
But let's just say Caleb Williams goes to Chicago. We'll say Drake Maye goes to Washington, and we'll say Jayden Daniels goes to New England. So the top 3 are gone. And then you have seemingly the next bout is JJ McCarthy, probably 4. Correct me if I'm forgetting someone. And then probably Nix and Michael Penix are in that kind of pendulum of desperate teams or 2nd round pick kind of thing. Sitting at 4 is Arizona. I think they've come out and been very clear that they are committed to Kyler Murray. And sitting at 5 is the Chargers. Obviously, they're good. Chargers typically never trade back. However, they have a new regime. Jim Harbaugh's mentioned he wants to go offensive line. They don't need to take an offensive line at 5. They can easily move back. Yeah. And obviously, their new GM, Ortiz from Baltimore, is very savvy in trading back. So when you look at 4 and 5, do you think that's the sweet spot where one of these, a la, we'll say Minnesota re-signs Kirk? So with Broncos, the Raiders, these quarterback needy teams kind of in the 10 range, is that where you mentioned the Giants at 6, Tennessee at 7? Who knows they should be good with Will Levis, but most likely Atlanta, if they miss out on Kirk Cousins, they're at 8.
Yeah.
Is that the sweet spot you see where they got to get to 4 or 5 to even get the 4th best quarterback?
I think so, but I'm gonna throw this one at you too, and I know I'm kind of breaking your rules here, but I see New England trading out of that pick because I don't. Yeah. Well, if they don't trade out of that pick, I don't see them taking a quarterback. They're not ready for a young quarterback. Their situation is not. It reminds me of Bryce Young going to Carolina.
It's a great point,
right? So to me, I think they're a target, so they could trade down. So if I'm the Giants, I want to trade up, or I'm the Vikings, or I'm the Raiders. I'm thinking 3 is available, depending on who the Patriots love. Now, number 4, St. Louis, Arizona. I'm thinking baseball. Arizona at number 4. To your point, they got Kyler Murray, right? They need a receiver. To me,
Neighbors
if Harrison is there, obviously,
or
if it goes top 3 quarterbacks first, and Arizona's there at 4, they could maybe trade down to 6 or 7 and maybe still think they can get Harrison. But might the Chargers, despite the fact of need of offensive line, might the Chargers take a Harrison there? I mean, you got the quarterback. So I think the Cardinals might be worried. And if at number 4, they might want to stay pat if 3 quarterbacks go, because then they can get their wide receiver. That's what they're missing that big wide receiver since Larry Fitzgerald left. They haven't been able to fill those shoes. So to me, but I do agree with you. I think 3 to 8 is the spot. I think picks 3, 4 are really the ones that are going to be at least more available. Could 2 be available? Maybe Washington. I just don't think they will. I think they're going to get their quarterback. And I just don't see, again, if I was going to bet on it, I would bet Chicago. There's no way they're not taking Caleb Williams. I just don't see it happening unless somebody does a Herschel Walker type Dallas trade from back in the day. Sorry, Vikings fans. When if somebody does something that crazy, then yes, I could see Chicago trading out of it, but not very far down. It would have to be somebody who's in the top 5-ish, because they're going to have to get a quarterback if they really feel like they're going to move on from Justin Fields.
Yeah, exactly. And I think to your point, the only way I see 2 available is if Washington traded up to 1 with Chicago, and then Chicago's in 2, and they trade back even more.
Yeah.
It's going to be, and that's a great point of Arizona, because they do need that. And with Marvin Harrison Jr., if they're in love with him, I don't see him making it past 5 or 6. But if they're okay with a Malik Neighbors or a Rome Odunze, then maybe they're willing to drop back farther to let someone move up. The Chargers, like, I know fans absolutely think it's a slam dunk, either Neighbors or Brock Bowers. That's what fans will tell you.
Yeah.
Based on everything we know about Jim Harbaugh, it's going to be a trench pick. I truly believe, I do not think there's a world where they draft one of those. I wouldn't be mad at it. I'd be okay. I just think what he wants to build in LA is starting with smash mouth football in the trenches. And so a Joe Alt or one of those centers, there's 3 centers that are projected in the first round, but you're probably not going to take that at 5. So the Chargers may be the most intriguing team of trading back for these quarterback needy teams. And you could probably do it because Arizona, like you said, they want that specific probably position. Arizona's not going QB. So if the Broncos, if the Raiders have fallen in love with JJ McCarthy, they can probably get it done at 5.
Yeah, I think so too. And then it all depends on where those guys end up. I mean, Williams will be 1, and Drake Maye, though, we talked about this on our Raiders show.
Yeah.
People are forgetting about Drake Maye. And if you look at Drake Maye, his comp player in the NFL right now is Justin Herbert. I mean, they are very similar in how they play and the arm strength and all that stuff. So a lot of the comparisons you see to Drake Maye is Justin Herbert, but yet nobody's talking about it because the other 2 quarterbacks are both Heisman Trophy winners. So it's like, well, of course he gets lost in the shuffle a little bit, but I see Washington grabbing him, but we'll see how it all works out. It's going to be fascinating. And of course it starts with the combine. We'll see some of those guys at the combine and see if they hurt or help their stock. Of course, the interview is the most important thing there. And you talked about that last show in the suites above Lucas Oil Stadium where they're having their conversation. So it's going to be fascinating. And I do know we're going to have a major push and coverage around the combine here on sportsnot.com. So make sure you do that. We'll also have some video. Ryan and I will be talking about it next week here on this show on Wednesday as we wrap up this edition of the Not Zone. Going to be fun, man. I know it, like you said, the really only true dead period in the NFL is the dead period after rookie minicamp through June until camp hits at the end of July.
Yeah.
It is nothing. There's nothing going on. But right now, we're starting to ramp up to next week, and there'll be a tiny little lull, and then we're right back into it with free agency and trades and getting geared up for the draft, man. It's right around the corner. I'm excited.
It's crazy. And it's going to be, I don't want to say a circus, but a lot of stuff's happening. It's going to start with free agency, and it's going to be a lot of fun. So excited to be going through it with you. And next week should be a blast covering the combine with all the storylines.
It will be. All right, my man. I will see you then. Right?
See you then.
You'll be back, hopefully. I didn't scare you off, or
here for the long haul, my friend. Here for the long haul.
The talk about Harry didn't get to you, or okay. God, I just want to make sure.
Thick skull.
That's right. That's right. All right. I appreciate you guys, everybody, for being here. Do us a favor. Make sure you subscribe to the Sports Not YouTube channel. If you're watching us on X.com or Facebook, head over to the YouTube channel, subscribe, or just tune in here every Wednesday, wherever you're watching. to the Not So, where we talk about NFL football and everything else that's going on in the world of professional football. For everybody here at sportsnot.com and my partner, Ryan Dyrud, I am Scott Branson. Take care, everyone. We will see you next week talking all things NFL Combine. Bye-bye now.